The morning mist hung heavy over Thornfield Castle as Lady Catherine stood at the grand window of the East Tower, her slender fingers pressed against the cold glass. Below in the courtyard, servants hurried about, loading trunks onto the waiting carriages. Each thud of leather against wood echoed through her heart like a death knell. Lord William Ashford watched her from the doorway, unable to move closer. The space between them felt like an ocean. Though only 20 feet of Persian carpet separated their bodies, his dark hair fell untidily across his forehead, a sign of the sleepless night he had endured. The arguments with his mother, the Duchess Margareta, had lasted until dawn. Catherine turned slowly, and William's breath caught in his throat. Her emerald eyes, usually so bright and full of life, were rimmed with red. The tears she had fought so hard to contain throughout the night had left their mark. Her golden hair, normally arranged in perfect curls, hung loose around her shoulders like a mourning veil. "Must it be today?" William's voice cracked, betraying the emotion he struggled to control. As the heir to one of England's most powerful duchies, he had been trained from birth to maintain composure. But Catherine had always been his weakness. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. The letter from her father, the Earl of Pemberton, lay crumpled on the writing desk. Its contents were brief but final. She was to return home immediately to marry Lord Blackwood, a man 30 years her senior, but wealthy enough to save her family's crumbling estate. William crossed the room in 3 quick strides, catching her hands in his. They were ice cold, trembling like autumn leaves. "We could run away," he whispered urgently. "Scotland, France, anywhere. I have money saved. We could start a new life." Catherine's tears finally spilled over, tracing silver paths down her pale cheeks. "And what of your inheritance? Your duty? Your family's legacy that stretches back 500 years? She pulled one hand free to touch his face gently. "You would be disinherited, cast out. I cannot be the cause of your ruin." "You could never be my ruin," William said fiercely. "You are my salvation." From the hallway came the sharp click of heels on marble. Both young lovers tensed, knowing that sound all too well. The Duchess Margareta swept into the room, her black silk dress rustling like raven's wings. At 55, she remained a formidable woman. Her silver hair arranged in an elaborate style that added inches to her already impressive height. Behind her lurked Lady Camilla Rothschild, William's intended bride according to his mother's grand plans. Where Catherine was all golden warmth, Camilla was sharp angles and calculated beauty. Her dark eyes glittered with barely concealed triumph as she took in the scene before her. "The carriages are ready, Lady Catherine," the Duchess announced, her tone suggesting this was merely a business transaction rather than the destruction of 2 young hearts. "I trust you have said your farewells." William's jaw clenched. "Mother, surely nothing." Margareta cut him off with a wave of her jeweled hand. "Lady Catherine understands her duty, as you must understand yours. The Rothschild alliance will secure our family's position for generations." Camilla stepped forward, sliding her arm through William's with possessive ease. He stiffened, but did not pull away, knowing it would only make things worse for Catherine. "Don't worry, darling," Camilla purred. "I'm sure Lady Catherine will be very happy with Lord Blackwood. I hear he's already buried 2 wives. Perhaps she'll have better luck." The cruelty of the comment hung in the air like poison. Catherine lifted her chin, summoning every ounce of noble breeding she possessed. "Thank you for your concern, Lady Camilla. I'm sure we all must follow the paths laid out for us." She turned back to William, memorizing every line of his face. The strong jaw she had traced with her fingers on stolen afternoons in the garden. The deep brown eyes that had looked at her with such tenderness. The lips that had whispered promises of forever in the darkness. "Goodbye, Lord Ashford," she said formally, dropping into a perfect curtsy. "I wish you every happiness in your future." William bowed stiffly, his entire body screaming rebellion against the charade. "And I you, Lady Catherine. May you find peace." The word peace nearly choked him. How could either of them find peace when their hearts were being torn asunder? Catherine moved toward the door, each step measured and careful. She could feel 3 sets of eyes on her back. William's anguished, Margaretta's satisfied, and Camilla's gloating. At the threshold, she paused for just a moment, her hand gripping the doorframe for support. "Catherine," William called out, unable to help himself. She turned, and for one perfect, terrible moment, their eyes met across the room. Everything they could not say aloud passed between them in that glance. The walks in the rose garden, the secret letters passed through trusted servants, the stolen kisses in the library, the dreams of a future that would never be. "Yes, Lord Ashford," she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. What could he say with his mother and Camilla watching? How could he express that she was taking his very soul with her? "Safe travels," he said finally, the words ashes in his mouth. Catherine nodded once and fled, her footsteps echoing down the corridor. William stood frozen, listening to the sound fade away, taking with it all the light in his world. Camilla's satisfied smile widened as she felt him tremble beneath her touch. "Oh, don't look so glum, darling. You'll forget all about her once we're married. I'll make quite sure of that." The Duchess nodded approvingly. "Camilla is right, William. This infatuation would have passed in time. Lady Catherine was never suitable, her family's debts, the scandal with her brother's gambling. You'll thank me one day." William said nothing, staring at the empty doorway. Through the window, he could hear the carriages beginning to move, wheels crunching on gravel. He broke free from Camilla's grasp and rushed to the window, pressing his palms against the glass just as Catherine had done. The lead carriage was just passing beneath the tower. For one heart-stopping moment, Catherine's face appeared at the carriage window. Looking up, even from this distance, he could see the tears streaming down her face. She pressed her hand to her lips, then to her heart, before the carriage turned the corner and vanished from sight. William's legs gave out, and he sank to his knees by the window, his carefully constructed world crumbling around him. Behind him, he heard his mother speaking to Camilla about wedding preparations, but the words were meaningless noise. In the courtyard below, the last traces of the carriage wheels were already being swept away by efficient servants. Soon, it would be as if Catherine had never been there at all. But William knew that was a lie. She had left marks on his soul that no amount of time could erase. 6 months had passed since that terrible morning, and Thornfield Castle had transformed into a glittering cage. Preparations for the wedding of Lord William Ashford and Lady Camilla Rothschild consumed every corner of the ancient stronghold. Seamstresses worked through the night on Camilla's elaborate trousseau. Florists debated the merits of white roses versus lilies, and the Duchess Margaretta orchestrated it all with military precision. William moved through the days like a man sleepwalking. He attended the fittings, signed the documents, and smiled when required. But those who knew him well noticed the change. His laughter, once quick and warm, had vanished entirely. His eyes, which had sparkled with intelligence and humor, were now flat and lifeless as winter stones. In her private chambers, Camilla studied her reflection with satisfaction. The wedding gown was a masterpiece of silk and diamonds, designed to showcase her dark beauty and the Rothschild wealth. Everything was proceeding according to plan, except for one irritating detail. Her intended groom seemed incapable of showing proper enthusiasm. "You could at least pretend to be happy," she said, adjusting a diamond tiara in her raven hair. "It's becoming rather tiresome, this constant melancholy." William stood by the window, always the window, staring out at the gardens where he had once walked with Catherine. "I agreed to marry you, Camilla. I never agreed to perform happiness." Her eyes flashed dangerously. "You still think of her?" "It wasn't a question. Every day," William replied simply, seeing no point in deception. Camilla's beautiful face twisted with fury. She swept across the room, her silk skirts hissing against the floor. "She's gone, William. Married to that decrepit old fool Blackwood 2 months ago. I made sure to obtain a copy of the announcement." She thrust a newspaper clipping at him with vicious satisfaction. William didn't need to look. He had already seen it. Had already spent a night drowning his sorrows in brandy, while staring at the brief, cold words that announced Catherine's marriage. His spies had sent word that she had looked pale as death at the ceremony, that she had fainted at the altar and had to be revived with smelling salts. "Does it bring you joy, tormenting me?" he asked quietly. "It brings me satisfaction," Camilla admitted. "You should know by now that I always get what I want. And I want you. Your title, your lands, your position. They will all be mine. Your heart?" She laughed, a sound like breaking crystal. "I have no use for such a weak, useless thing. Keep it buried with your precious Catherine, for all I care." A knock at the door interrupted what might have become another bitter argument. A footman entered, bowing low. "My lord, a message has arrived." The messenger said it was most urgent. William took the letter, noting the unfamiliar seal. His hands began to tremble as he read, the color draining from his face. The paper slipped from nerveless fingers, floating to the floor like a dying bird. "What is it?" Camilla demanded, annoyed by this interruption to their wedding planning. "Lord Blackwood is dead," William said hoarsely. "Thrown from his horse 3 days ago. Catherine. Lady Blackwood is a widow." The silence that followed was deafening. Camilla's face went through a series of expressions: shock, calculation, and finally, cold fury. "Don't even think about it," she hissed. "The wedding is in 2 weeks. The invitations have been sent. The contracts have been signed." But William was already moving, life flooding back into his dead eyes. "The contracts specify a wedding between our families. They say nothing about which members. Your mother will never allow it. My mother will have to accept it." For the first time in 6 months, William smiled. "And it was a dangerous thing. Or I'll renounce my title and inheritance entirely. Let her try to maintain the family prestige with no heir." He strode from the room, leaving Camilla shrieking behind him. Down the corridors he went, servants scattering from his path, until he reached his mother's study. The Duchess Margareta looked up from her correspondence, taking in his flushed face and bright eyes with immediate suspicion. "I take it you've heard about Lord Blackwood," she said carefully. "I'm going to her," William announced. "You most certainly are not." Margareta rose from her desk, every inch the imperious Duchess. "The arrangements with the Rothschilds can be modified or cancelled. I care not which." "William, be reasonable. The girl is in mourning. It would be scandalous to approach her now." "Scandal?" William laughed bitterly. "You speak to me of scandal? You who forced her into marriage with a man old enough to be her grandfather? You who destroyed our happiness for the sake of alliance and gold? I did what was necessary for this family. You did what was convenient," William shot back. "But no more. I've played your game for 6 months, mother. I've been the dutiful son, the perfect heir, but if you try to stop me now, I swear by all that's holy, I'll walk away from everything. The title, the lands, the legacy, none of it means anything without her." Margareta studied her son, seeing something in his face that gave her pause. She had pushed him to the breaking point, and she was politician enough to know when to retreat. "And if she refuses you? She may blame you for not fighting harder for her." "Then at least I'll have tried," William said. "At least I'll know." Within the hour, he was mounted on his fastest horse, racing through the countryside toward the Blackwood estate. The autumn wind whipped at his face, but he barely noticed. All he could think about was Catherine. Was she well? Did she mourn her elderly husband? Or was she, like him, finally free? Meanwhile, at Thornfield Castle, Camilla raged through the halls like a tempest. Priceless vases shattered against walls, and servants cowered as she screamed her fury. The Duchess watched with calculating eyes, already forming new plans. The Rothschild alliance was valuable, but perhaps there were other ways to secure it. Camilla had younger brothers. After all, as night fell, William arrived at Blackwood Manor, a grim Georgian edifice that seemed to crouch against the darkening sky. The butler who answered the door looked surprised to receive such an exalted visitor. "I must see Lady Blackwood," William said, trying to keep the desperation from his voice. "Please, it's urgent. I'm afraid her ladyship is not receiving visitors, my lord." The period of mourning. Tell her Lord William Ashford is here, William interrupted. Tell her. Tell her I should have come sooner. The butler disappeared, leaving William to pace the cold entry hall. The minutes stretched like hours before footsteps echoed on the stairs. He looked up, his heart stopping. Catherine descended slowly, a vision in black mourning clothes. She was thinner than he remembered, her cheekbones sharp beneath pale skin. But her eyes, those emerald eyes that had haunted his dreams, blazed with an emotion he couldn't quite read. William, she breathed, gripping the banister. You shouldn't be here. I shouldn't be anywhere else, he replied, moving to the foot of the stairs. Catherine, I'm so sorry. For everything. For not fighting harder. For letting them separate us. Stop, she said, holding up a hand. She completed her descent, and they stood facing each other in the dim hallway, 6 months of pain and separation hanging between them. William ached to touch her, to pull her into his arms. But he forced himself to remain still. I heard about your wedding, she said quietly. 2 weeks, isn't it? Lady Camilla must be very happy. There will be no wedding, William said firmly. Not to her, not ever. Catherine's eyes widened. Your mother can accept it or lose her son entirely. He took a step closer. Catherine, I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I failed you when you needed me most, but I'm here now, and I swear to you, nothing, no force on earth, will make me leave again unless you send me away. Tears gathered in her eyes, spilling over to trace familiar paths down her cheeks. Do you know what these 6 months have been like? Married to a man who saw me as nothing more than a pretty ornament to display, sleeping in a bed that felt like a tomb, dying a little more each day. Catherine, his voice broke. No. You need to hear this, she continued, her voice gaining strength. I survived because I had to. Because giving up would have meant letting them win. But also because I couldn't stop hoping. Even when hope was foolish. Even when it hurt. I couldn't stop believing that somehow, someday, she trailed off, unable to finish. William could bear it no longer. He closed the distance between them. Catching her hands in his. They were still cold, still trembling, just as they had been on that terrible morning. Marry me, he said urgently. I know it's too soon. I know you're in mourning. I know 1,000 reasons why you should refuse. But marry me anyway. Let me spend the rest of my life making amends for these lost months. Catherine searched his face, seeing there the boy she had fallen in love with and the man he had become. The suffering had changed them both, had carved lines of pain that would never fully fade. But beneath it all, the love remained, battered but unbroken. Yes, she whispered. William blinked, certain he had misheard. Yes? Yes, she repeated, louder this time. A smile, the first in 6 months, bloomed across her face like spring after endless winter. Yes, I'll marry you, William Ashford. In 2 weeks or 2 years, in a cathedral or a cottage, with your mother's blessing or without it, yes. He crushed her to him then, past caring about propriety or scandal. She melted against him, and for the first time in 6 months, the world felt right again. They stayed that way for long moments, holding each other in the dim hallway while the autumn wind rattled the windows. When they finally drew apart, Catherine's eyes were bright with tears, but they were tears of joy now. What about Lady Camilla? She won't give you up easily. Let her try to stop us, William said fiercely. I've been dead these 6 months, Catherine. You've brought me back to life. I won't let anyone bury me again. She touched his face wonderingly, as if ensuring he was real. We'll face a storm. Your mother. Society. The gossips. Then we'll weather it together, he promised. No more separations, no more duty before love. Just us, facing whatever comes. Outside, thunder rumbled across the countryside, promising a tempest. But inside the manor, 2 hearts that had been split apart began the slow, painful, joyful process of healing. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be battles with the Duchess, Camilla's fury to contend with, and society's judgment to endure. But they would face it all together this time. And that, they knew, would make all the difference. The news of Lord William Ashford's midnight ride to the Blackwood estate reached Thornfield Castle before dawn, carried by servants whose loyalty to gossip exceeded their loyalty to their employers. By the time the sun rose, the entire household knew that their young lord had defied his mother and abandoned his bride to be mere days before the wedding. Camilla Rothschild stood in the wreckage of what should have been her bridal chamber, surrounded by shredded silk and scattered pearls. She had spent the night in a fury that bordered on madness, destroying every symbol of the wedding that would never be. Her lady's maid cowered in the corner, afraid to approach her mistress in such a state. "Get out," Camilla snarled, and the girl fled gratefully. Alone, Camilla stared at her reflection in the cracked mirror. Her perfect face was marred by tears of rage, her carefully arranged hair wild about her shoulders. Everything she had schemed for, everything she had been promised, was crumbling to dust. And all because of that insipid blonde girl who couldn't even hold on to William when she had him. A knock interrupted her bitter thoughts. The Duchess Margareta entered without waiting for permission, taking in the destruction with raised eyebrows. Unlike Camilla, she appeared perfectly composed, not a silver hair out of place. "I trust you've heard," Margareta said coolly. "Heard?" Camilla laughed hysterically. "That your son has made a fool of me? That he's thrown away our alliance for a newly widowed nobody? Oh yes, I've heard. Compose yourself," the Duchess ordered sharply. "Hysterics will solve nothing. We must think strategically." Strategically?" Camilla whirled on her. "Your strategy failed the moment you underestimated your son's attachment to that girl. I told you we should have sent her farther away, somewhere he could never find her." Margareta's eyes narrowed dangerously. "Need I remind you that Lord Blackwood's death was entirely unforeseen? Everything was proceeding perfectly until it wasn't," Camilla interrupted. "And now I'm left as the abandoned bride, the laughingstock of society. Do you have any idea what this will do to my reputation?" "Your reputation is my least concern at the moment," Margareta replied coldly. "We must focus on salvaging what we can from this disaster." Before Camilla could respond, another knock came at the door. A footman entered, bowing nervously. "Your Grace, Lord William has returned. He requests an audience in your study." The two women exchanged glances. "He dares to show his face?" Camilla hissed. "Of course he does," Margareta said. "He's my son, after all. Courage was never his failing." She turned to leave, then paused. "You may join us, if you can control yourself. But if you speak one word out of turn, I'll have you removed." They found William waiting in the study, standing tall and unrepentant. Gone was the hollow-eyed ghost of the past 6 months. In his place stood a man reborn, radiating a quiet strength that made even his formidable mother pause. "William," she began, but he held up a hand. "Before you say anything, Mother, let me be clear. Catherine has agreed to marry me. We'll wait the proper mourning period, of course, but nothing you say or do will change our minds. You would throw away everything for her?" Margareta's voice was ice. "Your position? Your future? The alliance we've worked years to build? I would throw away far more than that," William replied simply. "I've spent 6 months in hell, Mother. 6 months, watching the days pass in meaningless ritual, while the woman I love suffered in a marriage you helped orchestrate. I won't waste another moment." "How touching," Camilla interjected, unable to contain herself. "And what of me? What of the humiliation you've subjected me to?" William turned to her. And for the first time, there was pity in his eyes. "I'm sorry, Camilla. Truly. You deserve a husband who can love you completely. And I could never be that man. Consider this a blessing in disguise." "A blessing?" She advanced on him, fury radiating from every line of her body. "You've ruined me." "No," William said firmly. "You've ruined yourself with your schemes and manipulations. You never wanted me, Camilla. You wanted my title, my wealth, my position. Well, you're free to find them elsewhere now. Camilla raised her hand to strike him, but Margareta caught her wrist. Enough. You're embarrassing yourself further. She turned to her son. And you? William, have you considered the full ramifications of this choice? Society will gossip. Our family's reputation will survive, as it has survived far worse scandals over the centuries. William interrupted. Mother, I'm not asking for your permission. I'm informing you of my decision. You can accept Catherine as my wife and your future daughter-in-law, or you can lose your son entirely. The choice is yours. The Duchess studied him for a long moment, recognizing the steel beneath the polite words. She had pushed him as far as he could be pushed, and he had finally pushed back. A part of her, buried deep beneath years of calculation and control, felt a flicker of pride. You're certain she's worth all this? She asked finally. She's worth everything, William replied without hesitation. Margareta sighed, suddenly looking every one of her 55 years. Then, I suppose I have no choice. But there will be conditions. No, William said firmly. No conditions. No conditions. No conditions. No machinations. No attempts to control our lives. Catherine and I will marry on our terms, live where we choose, and raise our children as we see fit. You can be a part of that life if you can accept these terms. Otherwise, we'll manage without you. Camilla made a sound of disgust. You're going to let him dictate to you? The great Duchess of Thornfield? Brought low by her lovesick son? Be silent, Margareta snapped. She kept her eyes on William, seeing in him echoes of his late father. The same stubbornness, the same capacity for both great love and great resolve. Very well. You've made your position clear. Then we understand each other. William bowed slightly. I'll be returning to the Blackwood estate. Catherine and I have much to discuss. When you're ready to meet with her properly, as my future wife, not as an inconvenience to be managed, send word. He turned to leave, but Camilla's voice stopped him. You'll regret this, William. Both of you will. Love fades, but power and position endure. When you're old and gray, living in some modest manner with your precious Catherine, remember that you could have had everything. William looked back at her with something approaching sympathy. Camilla, I already have everything. I'm sorry. You can't understand that. He left them then, striding from the castle with purpose. As he mounted his horse, he felt the weight of 6 months' misery lifting from his shoulders. There would be challenges ahead. Society's whispers, the delicate period of mourning to navigate, the slow work of rebuilding trust with his mother. But none of it mattered compared to the joy of knowing Catherine had said yes. Back in the study, Camilla raged and threatened while Margareta sat in stony silence, already calculating how to minimize the social damage. The wedding gifts would need to be returned, the guests notified, explanations crafted. It would be a monumental task, but she had weathered worse storms. I'll ruin them, Camilla was saying. I'll make sure everyone knows what he's done. They'll be outcasts, pariahs. You'll do nothing of the sort, Margareta said sharply. You'll return to London with dignity intact, and we'll craft a story of mutual unsuitability. Any attempt to damage my son or his future wife will be met with the full force of the Ashford influence. Do I make myself clear? Camilla stared at her, realizing that the Duchess's protection now extended to Catherine. The irony was bitter as wormwood. You're taking her side? I'm taking my family's side, Margareta corrected. And Catherine, whether I like it or not, will soon be family. Now, I suggest you begin packing. Your carriage will be ready within the hour. Defeated, Camilla stormed from the room, leaving the Duchess alone with her thoughts. Margareta moved to the window, watching her son disappear down the drive. Perhaps it was time to admit what she had always known but refused to acknowledge. That William's love for Catherine was not some passing fancy but the kind of deep, abiding connection that came perhaps once in a lifetime. She had tried to control it, to redirect it, to break it entirely. But love, true love, was like water. It found its way through every barrier, shaped itself to every obstacle, and eventually wore down even the hardest stone. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change. Camilla returned to London, where her family's influence and a carefully crafted story of discovering fundamental incompatibilities allowed her to save face. Within 6 months, she would be engaged to a wealthy merchant's son, finding in commerce what she had failed to find in nobility. William took residence at a property near the Blackwood estate, close enough to visit Catherine daily, but maintaining propriety during her mourning period. They spent hours walking in the gardens, slowly relearning each other after their painful separation. The trust that had been damaged needed time to heal, but with each passing day, their bond grew stronger. The Duchess, after much internal struggle, made the journey to meet with Catherine properly. It was an awkward tea, full of careful politeness and unspoken tensions. But it was a beginning. Margareta could not help but notice how her son came alive in Catherine's presence, how the shadows fled from his eyes when she smiled. "You truly love him," the Duchess observed during a moment when William had stepped away. Catherine met her gaze steadily. "With all my heart, Your Grace. I always have. And you can forgive me for what I did?" Catherine was quiet for a moment. "I can try," she said finally. "For William's sake, and for the sake of the family we'll build together, I can try." It was more than Margareta had any right to expect, and she knew it. When the mourning period ended, William and Catherine were married in a simple ceremony at the village church. It was not the grand cathedral wedding that had been planned with Camilla, but it was perfect in its simplicity. Catherine wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her slender frame. William couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle, radiant with joy. The Duchess attended, sitting in the front row with quiet dignity. When the vicar asked if anyone objected to the union, the silence was profound and peaceful. No dramatic interruptions, no last-minute revelations. Just two people who had fought through separation and sorrow to find their way back to each other. As they exchanged vows, William thought of that terrible morning when Catherine had been torn away from him. The memory still hurt, would always hurt, but it no longer had the power to destroy him. They had survived the worst that could be thrown at them and emerged stronger. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the vicar declared, and William kissed his bride with all the pent-up longing of their months apart. The small congregation erupted in applause, and even the Duchess was seen to dab at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. As the newlyweds walked back down the aisle, sunlight streamed through the stained glass windows, bathing them in colors of gold and green and blue. Outside the church, the villagers had gathered to throw rose petals and wish them well. These were the people who had known William since he was a boy, who had watched him grow hollow during his separation from Catherine and bloom again at her return. Their joy was genuine and infectious. As their carriage pulled away, Catherine nestled against her husband's side, hardly able to believe it was real. "No more goodbyes," she murmured. "Never again," William promised, pressing a kiss to her golden hair. "From this day forward, wherever you go, I go. Whatever storms come, we weather them together." "Even your mother?" Catherine asked with a small smile. "Especially my mother," William laughed. "Though I think she's beginning to soften. Give her a grandchild or two, and she'll be eating out of your hand." Catherine blushed prettily at the mention of children, and William's heart swelled with love and possibility. They had lost 6 months to duty and manipulation, but they had a lifetime ahead to make up for it. As the carriage rolled through the countryside toward their new home, a modest but beautiful estate that William had purchased as a wedding gift, he reflected on the journey that had brought them here. The pain had been real, the separation agony, but it had taught them both the value of what they had. Their love had been tested in the cruelest possible way, and had emerged not weakened but tempered, like steel forged in fire. Whatever challenges lay ahead, William knew they would face them together, hand in hand, heart to heart. The sun was setting as they arrived at their new home, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. The servants had prepared everything beautifully, with flowers in every room, and a wedding supper laid out in the intimate dining room. But William and Catherine had eyes only for each other. As he carried her over the threshold, she laughed with pure joy, the sound echoing through their new home like a blessing. "Welcome home, Lady Ashford," William said softly. "Welcome home, my love," she replied, and kissed him as the door closed behind them, shutting out the world and all its troubles. In the years that followed, their love story would become something of a legend in the county. The tale of the noble heir who defied his family for true love, and the lady who endured separation and sorrow, but never gave up hope. They would have children who grew up hearing the story, who learned from their parents that love was worth fighting for, worth sacrificing for, worth choosing above all else. The Duchess, as William had predicted, did soften over time, especially when her first grandchild was placed in her arms. She never fully apologized for her actions, but she showed her regret in other ways, in her fierce protection of Catherine, when society gossips tried to resurrect old scandals, in the generous gifts she bestowed upon her grandchildren, in the way she began to defer to Catherine's judgment in family matters. As for Camilla, she found her own version of happiness in her merchant husband, who appreciated her cunning in business matters and gave her the power she had always craved, albeit in a different sphere than she had originally intended. But the heart of the story always remained William and Catherine, whose love had survived the worst that pride, duty, and ambition could devise. They lived not in the grandest castle or with the highest titles, but with something far more valuable: a true partnership, built on trust, tested by adversity, and strengthened by their absolute devotion to each other. And if sometimes William still stood by windows, looking out at the road, it was no longer with longing for what was lost, but with gratitude for what had been found again. Catherine would join him there, slipping her hand into his, and together they would watch the sun set over their lands, knowing that whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. The boy who had loved freely and the girl with golden hair had found their happy ending at last, not in spite of their trials but because of them. For it was in the darkness of separation that they had learned the true value of their love, and in the joy of reunion that they had vowed never to take it for granted again. And they never did. As the morning sun finally broke through the mist, illuminating the empty courtyard, William made a silent vow. He would play the part his mother demanded. He would marry Camilla if he must. But his heart would always belong to the golden-haired girl who had taken it with her on this misty morning. The Duchess and Camilla finally left him alone, satisfied that the unpleasant business was concluded. William remained by the window, watching the road that had taken Catherine away, until the dinner bell rang hours later. When he finally rose, his face was set in hard lines that would become permanent over the years to come. The boy who had loved freely and hoped wildly died that morning. In his place stood the man he would become, cold, dutiful, and forever haunted by the ghost of what might have been.